All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are joined by Alex Afrasiabi from the World of Warcraft team. So, Alex, just run us through really quickly what exactly it is that you do for World of Warcraft.
Sure, I'm creative director for World of Warcraft. My day-to-day involves a lot of meetings. The whole of the creative vision for WoW and WoW-related things kind of falls under my purview. So pretty much my hands are on almost every aspect outside of like straight system stuff, and even that I just make it my business because I'm nosy that way. So, so yeah, I kind of touch everything.
So a bit of everything. Wow, that's awesome. So Perk, I know that you had one particular question we've been getting from a lot of fans about models.
Just get that out of the way.
We're just going to hit you with everything.
Okay,
if
so
that's
how
all right.
are the Blood Elf models coming along, and are going to see them for 6.1, or is that unknown yet?
I don't think we've actually given a date.
Okay.
They're looking awesome. So I'm really excited for whenever we have our release. But you know, they've been working hard on getting those things modeled, as it were. And so, yes, I'm excited. It's going to happen, I promise.
Yeah, I think players are just going to be really happy to hear
Yes.
that, like, just the confirmation that they're still being worked on is absolutely. And do we think that we're going to see more customization coming in for the races? Like, obviously, this is the first time the big player base as a group has got to actually see the new models, get them on their own characters, rather than pre-maze on the beta. Is there additional customization options coming or tweaks to the existing models? Do we know?
This is a tricky question to answer because I know the fans have a desire, myself being a fan, for certain things. You know, I want an Iron Dwarf skin, or I want a Dark Iron, or Tonk, or whatever. And it's actually really tricky for things like that. Not saying never. These are things we're actively always kind of looking around and feeling around for. But yeah, you know, I can't confirm anything. What I can say is that we're definitely always interested in looking for how to make our characters look even cooler and more integrated with the world.
Awesome. And as far as the existing models, which we've seen already, are they going to be continue to be honed and worked on, or are they kind of feeling done with those right now?
It's again one of those things. Like maybe in 10 years. You know, right? Because I feel like the models were wonderful 10 years ago, and over over the decade they aged a bit, and we brought them right back up and above and beyond. I think they're wonderful now. So we're always trying to improve our art. You know, the art of WoW. So I wouldn't rule it out.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yes. So continuing on with customization, I think it's a really awesome addition that the barbershop now lets you change more of your facial features, but is there any chance we could see skin tones added to the barbershop? Because that can really change what your character looks like, and it's the one customization option that you can't get in the barbershop now.
There's totally a chance. I honestly had no idea you couldn't change your skin tones in the barbershop.
Oh, well, there you go.
Thank you for educating me. So it seems like, you know, we'll certainly talk about it. I couldn't make a promise, yes or no, but it's worth discussion. So we'll absolutely talk about it.
Awesome.
Absolutely. We're going to keep going with the character model questions for a little while longer. We've had a ton of people asking us if we're going to see anything for the Worgen and the Goblins. Is that something that you know, whether we're looking at it for future, or are they too new still?
You know, these are. I wish I could give an answer on that. I really don't know. Chris Robinson's the man to ask for that. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth and then So certainly, you know, if it got to a point where we felt like the Goblins and Worgen needed a little more of a boost, a little touch up, I wouldn't rule it out. But again, I couldn't confirm that at all. No.
Yeah, finally, one last one. Was the decision to let players keep their old character models intended, or is that sort of a last-minute thing? Because I know some people do like having the old model option available.
You mean whether I can choose HD or
swap
SD?
back. Yeah.
Well, I would. Yes, it was intended, but more for performance reasons.
Oh, okay.
So SD actually falls back if you're at a certain point in the performance threshold. So some machines, because WoW is such a broad game and that we support so many different systems, some machines can't necessarily handle the new models, so they fall back to the old models.
Yeah, that's really interesting because a lot of people feel attached to their characters and they're using it for cosmetic reasons as opposed
That
to
is interesting. Yeah,
performance. So
that's
pretty
metagame.
neat.
That's what happens, right?
Absolutely. Now, we know that historically you've been a lot of the quest design, like you were doing quest design earlier in your career in WoW, so we've got a bunch of questions about that. Perk, I know you had something about some of the areas which have been a bit closed off on the beta and that we haven't been able to see a ton in, and what we might be able to get into there.
Yeah, so it's been stated in the blue post that we're going to get the rest of Tanan at some point, 6.1. We've had some other ideas, like there's level 100 areas in Gorgrond and other places. Can you give us any sort of teaser what's in 6.1? Are you planning to have heirloom storage coming soon or other sorts of zones?
I can't talk about unreleased content that we haven't put any patches out on or any notes or anything like that. We will see Tanan though. We're actually, I will tease that one. There's definitely more to Tanan, and we're really actively kind of working towards it and excited for the fans to see it. And then obviously we're working on a 6.1 or whatever you want to call it, and it's coming. That's really as much as I can say about that.
No problem at all. So, I mean, from the side of questing, which we've seen a lot about recently from the Artcraft stuff, is kind of the balance between the art and design side of questing versus, you've got the content and how it's all going to flow. How has that been different for you guys, particularly with the absence of flying? Does that make it different how you design a zone and how you put that together? Are there different challenges there with the removal of flying from the equation?
Sounds like a trick question.
I promise it's not a trick question. I'm not basing you, no. We're just honestly curious because we had that great Artcraft blog about level design.
No, I mean, if you think about how our zones have historically been laid out, it's a slippery slope when you start to design for flying. You just can't, no matter what. And so our zones have pretty much, if you look at a zone flow, you'll see that it's almost identical to what a zone flow was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever, in vanilla. So we cannot account for flying because it actually causes problems, right? If you start to design for those quests in mind and you're working on the pace and flow of a zone and you're going at 240 speed, that your distances become skewed and it gets really weird. Like there's a whole bunch of weird technical issues with that. So you just can't. So for Draenor, though, specifically, I feel like we did a really good job with running around. I got one level 100 character and a couple level 98, 99s that I've just been playing through. And we actively just kind of went through all the pressure points and pain points in the zones as we're on the ground playing ourselves and just going, well, it feels really crappy here. We need to put either a flight path or do something to make sure that the players aren't kind of stuck out here. And so I've been really happy with the results in Draenor. And then if you're still like, oh man, I totally need to like move around faster, get a mage tower.
Or stables,
yeah. And even
stables, yeah, totally, yeah.
And you've been putting a ton of work into really optimizing the flight paths as well, like making sure that we don't have.
I gave feedback.
Yeah, we all gave feedback. These crazy ones in Mr. Pandaria where they're going really around the houses before you get back to bases, and there's a ton of different options for getting around in Warlords. Are you looking at further additional flight paths and maintaining this sort of flight path thing? Like if you were to eventually bring flying in, is this new philosophy on flight paths something that's going to stick around, or are you going to go the more scenic route?
No, I think we'll continue to evolve the flight paths and make them as comfortable as possible. And then if flying comes around, it won't matter. It won't make a difference because players they'll fly and they'll do what they do. We do have some exciting stuff in the works that I won't talk about. For that type of thing. I'll leave it vague, that you won't see for a while, but there's some exciting stuff we're prototyping right now.
For transport side of things.
Kind of.
Okay.
This is very cryptic, Alex. This is very cryptic.
All right. So one thing that I really liked on the beta is seeing how the Draenor zones have references and throwbacks to their Burning Crusade counterparts. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of balance, keeping the flavor and the references to the old zones so they stay recognizable, while also still appearing fresh and new and not, I've already seen the low resolution version of this 5 years ago.
I think it's all about balance. We really had a mandate of this is Outland, so we absolutely have to be true to Outland and make sure that we are calling out and calling back to points in Outland, almost. I don't want to call it mechanically, but there became a point where it's like, no, you need to remind the player that this is something, right? Whether or not they played it, because if they haven't played it, it doesn't matter. But if they have played it, then it's even more awesome for them. So there was definitely an active effort to making sure that the world called back to itself. While at the same time, you clearly can't just go, let's just copy all the geo and up-res the textures and call it a day, because we would never do that, obviously. And you need to have a nice balance, which is what I was saying initially, of old and new. And that's really what we shot for.
Yeah, I mean, the starting zones, especially like, Frostfire Ridge is like Blade's Edge, but there's obviously snow, but it still has a throwback to that zone. And Shadow Moon Valley is all luscious, but it very clearly has that flavor of this sort of like Draenei grander occurrence. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, the zones are absolutely stunning. We've had a great time like leveling characters through them ourselves. And one thing we've heard a ton of feedback on, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, so I'm sorry. The orcs. There's a whole bunch of orcs in this expansion. It's pretty well. We can see a couple of them behind us. So creatively and sort of obviously from a gameplay design perspective, there must be stuff that you've done to try and shift the focus away, so you're not just going from zone to orc zone to orc zone. What are some of the challenges you faced there and the ways that you've dealt with them?
We redid whole zones.
You redid whole zones?
Wow.
Gorgon was completely redone before you guys saw it ever.
It was pretty buggy when we first came in. Yeah.
Shadow Moon was also redone for the same reason. We absolutely we recognized that as well. We actually called it the orc situation internally. What are we doing about this orc situation? And we really put our minds to making sure that we needed way more breakup. So yeah, Gorgon was, I want to say 90% Iron Horde at one point. And the zone was, sadly, the zone was actually done. So that was the big bummer. It's like, you learn as you design. Like, it's a learning process. And we're like, this shit is like, that's really what it came down to. We're like, okay, we have an orc situation. We need to fix this because we can't go from Gorgon or Frostfire and Shadow Moon to Gorgon and then to Tal. Like, you're gonna just be like, it's orc. 24/7 orcs just all over the place. So we redid the zone. Our designers, bless them, bless their hearts. They worked their butts off to get that zone up and awesome. And I thought they did a fantastic job. There's some really fun stuff in Gorgon.
Such a dual split between like the desert and then you've got the jungle. And,
it was kind of an experimental zone because one of the big initiatives for us also was Garrison integration into the zones. So we had the orc situation, we had Garrison integration. Those were our two big kind of incentives as we're designing. And Gorgon was the test of, well, let's just go, like, make your decision. Like, so when you go into every Warlord zone, for those that don't know, you have an outpost, and you get to choose one of the garrison structures or satellite structures for that outpost, and that somewhat affects how your gameplay is in the zone. For most of the zones, it's basically you get a cool ability or a buff. But for Gorgon specifically, it actually completely altered which quest chain you would get. So you would either go north for the Sanctum, the arena, and south for the lumber mill. And then what we did was we crossed over with what we call bonus objective areas. So if you got a lumber mill and the south quest line was your quest line, we overloaded the north with the bonus objective stuff, which are actually really rewarding. You guys should be doing them. For that choice, and then the inverse or reverse of that for the people that pick north. So it becomes a zone of like you can explore the south and do stuff and be totally rewarded for it if you're the guy that picked the north line and vice versa. It exposed some other issues to us, but it was cool.
That's amazing. I'm blown away that you guys actually, and that kind of explains also where we had that gap in the beta, where there was a bit of a time lapse
Frostfire in the alpha.
So I'm absolutely dying with curiosity to know what Shadow Moon was like, which you had to get rid of. How did you change Shadow Moon in getting out the orc situation?
You guys probably it's probably on YouTube. In the early,
I think maybe the PAX East build.
I think it might be the PAX East build. Yeah, because we were doing press. I was up in San Francisco months ago. 8 months ago. I don't know how long ago, but yeah, I mean, that was in that build. It was at the orc situation level. You actually started on the other side of the zone at Karabor, being assaulted by Iron Horde, and then there was like this giant scar that ran through all, like where Elidor is right now. If you know that awesome Draenei
Yeah, the
Vindicator
observatory is so cool.
yeah, but that thing ran through the whole zone practically, and it was just this massive scar. And like while it was mighty and savage and cool, we're like, well, look, you're going to come out of this Tanan experience. You're going to come out of this introduction experience before the expansion even launches, where the Iron Horde are invading orcs. Then you're going to go into Tanan, and it's going to be orc, warlord. It's like orcs, and then the first thing that happens in Shadow Moon is, guess what? Orcs. And we're going to hit you with orcs 24/7.
Yeah, no, I remember this as playing, I remember this at PAX. I was seeing Karabor and the orcs were attacking Velen and Rel.
Yeah. So, yeah, and bless the Shadow Moon crew as well, because, again, they worked their butts off to get the orc situation under control. And as a matter of fact, I feel like we literally reversed the entire flow of the zone, where it culminates at Karabor, which is...
It's super effective.
It's super cool. It really makes you feel like, well, I've kind of worked for this and I've earned it, and I have some kind of connection to the zone. And honestly, it's turned out to be at least one of my favorite zones. Top 2. Great job with that zone.
Cool. I just have one more sort of zone-related question tied to flying. So you did just say that you always design zones not with flying in mind, that it's all for the ground. But what were there things that you decided to focus on more, knowing that players didn't have the option to fly and ignore anything? Or are you hoping there are some things that players will do that they haven't done before? There's a lot of exploration, more so than in Mists of Pandaria.
Yeah, one quick thing though.
Yeah.
Because someone on Twitter is gonna probably call me names because I said we don't design our zones with flying in mind. We have in the past designed our zones with flying areas.
Okay.
That's different.
Okay.
People of Wowhead and Zam and out there.
Important statement.
I just want to make sure that, yes, I know that we have in the past, but we're talking about the critical quest path. That's specifically what I was talking about. And yeah, absolutely. I feel like that has evolved as well, with just level design and art becoming even more awesome with every expansion that passes by, which that's a fact, by the way. And we absolutely go to great lengths to make sure that there's so much detail and cool little things in the world for the players to find and explore. And so that's 100% the thing with Warlords, is that we want to make sure that while you're on the ground, you're fighting, you're questing, you're doing everything you're doing, that you have awesome things to look at and do.
Absolutely. We've had a great time finding things like the jumping puzzles, and the whole area of Spires of Arak just wouldn't be as good from the air. Like, it's
there's like a surprise around every corner, and you wouldn't have that if it just flew over the mountain.
Well, if we were designing Spires and we had flying at the get-go, we'd probably not have tree tops or something.
Yeah, sure. It would look very different. So moving on, one of the big things that people are looking forward to is the legendary quest line. So obviously we've had the Mists of Pandaria one, which was a big experiment, which I believe you guys feel was pretty successful because you're doing another one. So what have you kind of learned from the Mists of Pandaria one? What sort of lessons are you taking with you to the Warlords quest line for the legendary rings?
Honestly, it's a refinement. There were aspects of the legendary line that people hated, and Valor and PvP and various other things, and we've just refined on the kind of the pain points that people experience, because we don't necessarily want it to be a pain point, though we do want to encourage people to do these activities. I think we wanted to kind of pull back a little bit and let it be a little bit more natural and let it breathe. But ultimately, I feel like those legendary quest lines are one, heavily story related, and so they become a great way for us to showcase big story moments. And because we know the way we've got them structured, that most players will actually initiate them, there's some good exposure to kind of the mythos and lore of the world.
Cool. Just had a question about questing in general. So in Mists of Pandaria, we had radically different approaches to questing during the expansion. We've got tons of dailies at the start, and the timeless isle was pretty freeform. So where are we now with questing in Warlords of Draenor? What's the sort of philosophy for questing there?
That's a good question. Questing has evolved and continues to evolve for us. It's it's something we hotly debate internally. There's a lot of discussion that happens because the problem with questing is that the system as a whole is dated. Okay, so when you first started playing WoW 10 years ago, the idea of a quest was actually new and novel to you. That's just a fact. It was. They didn't really exist in games, at least not to that level. And as the years have kind of progressed, that collect 10 bear asses quest, where when it was initially like, oh my god, bear asses, like hell yeah, I want to bear asses. After like 400 of those, they actually, there's nothing special you can do to that quest
They all
anymore.
blend together.
Yeah, so it's been, so we're always trying to find other ways to package the bear ass for you, our lovely fans, so that so that it doesn't feel like again with the bear asses, and it's like no, we were actually working at that. But with that said, we're also trying to make we're actively kind of shifting into what we say is like one of our primary goals as designers for World of Warcraft is to bring people together, right? Like look at this, guys. Like where are we right now at BlizzCon? Like this is what we do, everybody. Like this is it. This is what we should be doing. And the follow up to that is to bring people together and to keep people together. And one of the things that we've been noticing with questing, since Wrath, and it's just kind of gotten progressively more like this, is that we isolate people a lot more. And certainly the story can be better told that way, and you can do more personal things, but there's a cost to that, right? And the cost is you're going to get into some weird phasing issue, or you're going to get into some weird visibility issue. And when our main goal is to bring and keep people together, that directly conflicts. So we're really actively kind of digging deep on this one and going like, is this the direction we really want to go? We need to kind of rethink things and really work towards bringing people together. And I'm not talking make the world like group quest, land and like nothing like that, but more of what we used to experience back in the day when, I hadn't made phasing a thing and ruined everything. And, where it was like you go out in the world and see people and meet friends and come to awesome conventions together and be happy. So we really want to make a push towards really emphasizing that, no, like we're not a single player game. We're going to continue to push awesome storylines and awesome quests and amazing things, but really with an emphasis on that group. Not when I say group, again, I'm not saying you're in a 5-man group, but the social atmosphere. So that is definitely something that we're going to be looking at strongly.
Awesome. And that kind of that goes pretty well with the stuff we've seen already on the beta with the like the dynamic event side of stuff. And are we going to see more sort of other creative solutions to, obviously things like mob tapping is obviously the very basic side of things. Are we going to be seeing more creative solutions along those lines? Do you have stuff in the works?
Absolutely. There's always, we're constantly in our lab, experimenting and doing things. I think we'll see stuff. Yeah. You can never do like a wholesale swap of systems like that because, well, the game just breaks. So it's always an incremental, hey, test this or try this, or let's mess around with this little thing. And so we'll see, yeah, but for sure we're always kind of pushing forward.
Yeah, I for one really appreciate the shift away from linearity in questing. Like you guys started that with Mists, and it's sort of just getting bigger and bigger.
More Mists.
Yeah, that's true. So one other big thing that we've heard a lot about with the expansion is Garrisons. And we've been sort of hearing a ton about them and talking about them. And one of the things we haven't heard a huge amount about is level 100 content that isn't super attached to the buildings. Like we know the buildings are awesome. There's a ton of cool content there. But we've heard a little bit about things like some story quests with like Azika Blade Fury. We had those teased a little while ago. And a bit about invasions, but we haven't had a ton of detail on those.
Yeah, they were added to the beta pretty late, so we didn't get to
exactly.
delve
So
into
these
them.
story quests and the invasions, can you just tell us a little bit more about what we can expect there?
Yeah, sure. There are chapter quests, we call them, that change every week, and they'll send you to different max level POIs around Draenor. And these are all tied into kind of the fabric of the story of Warlords. And so we're kind of pushing a progressive timeline on the story with those. And then with
Invasions.
Invasions, thank you. Similarly, so we give you a taste of invasions on the level up. I think there's like a Shadow Moon and a Frostfire invasion, like an initial one, Thunderlord, and yeah. And then once you get to max level, invasions actually become pretty, not important, but like a big deal. Like you should do them. They're very rewarding. As a matter of fact, you should do them with friends. And this is kind of in that initiative. You can do them solo, but with friends, the chances of success are greater, and your score being higher, better rewards. So those will be pretty cool, and weekly, maybe bi-weekly adventures that hopefully the players will like.
Fantastic.
All right, so our next question is sort of a slightly contentious topic. So the new faction hubs that we have, they've grown a lot over the beta, but it still seems to some players that if you get this Hearthstone for your Garrison, which has, vendors, like, profession buildings, all this cool stuff, it feels like the faction hub is almost competing with your Garrison, sort of how can these two things sort of coexist, and sort of has the purpose of these faction hubs, changed from past faction hubs and other expansions?
Exactly.
So how have they changed?
I mean, how do those two work together in a viable?
But you answered the question, right? I mean,
Right.
I was kind of
Yeah.
being jokey about it,
Yeah.
but there weren't Garrisons in other expansions,
Okay.
right? So like you throw something like a Garrison into the equation, and it changes everything. And that's really what the deciding factor was for us more than anything else. Was like, look, like we've got this Garrison, okay? You've got X number of players that exist on a server, okay, and there is an upper limit to that. And how many different buckets can you spread your player base into before it becomes too thin, right? And so now you start adding those buckets. We're like, okay, well, we got Garrisons. That's going to be a place where players are spread out into.
Yeah.
We've got capital cities, right? Orgrimmar, Stormwind, and so on and so forth, which players will further dilute out into. Well, okay, now we got 2 more cities in the continent, and then we've got Ashran, and then so it starts to become like, well, look, like how far and how wide do we want to spread our player base before they again going with the we want to bring people together and keep people together approach before they're not seeing each other, because that makes the experience of playing WoW worse. I would say
agreed.
decidedly worse. And so that was part of kind of a decision to look, like you can't have both. And I think Corey took all the heat for that, and it was me that was like, I wasn't gonna come up and no. But I mean, like that was absolutely the right call in my opinion. I would do it again, because I firmly believe that with a feature like Garrisons, you cannot also add 4 other hubs, 5, and I think have a healthy game. I think there is a tipping point and a balance point, and it's delicate. I'm sorry, guys. Like, we don't want you to be upset, because you're right that Karabor and Blazefire are awesome, but we have to decide: do we want Garrisons or do we want Karabor or Blazefire? And Garrisons wins every time, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an awesome addition to the game, and I think it's going to be a really, really huge thing. We are all kinds of out of time,
Yes.
Alex. This has been a really fascinating insight into the creative aspects of WoW, and your position and what you do. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again next time.